It's not a personal truth. It's not my truth, your truth, their truth. It's truth. And truth rings throughout all of eternity. It is changeless. It is endless. It is timeless. And that truth of our being is that everything is holy now. Everything is already holy now. And the promise that we court in this moment, the promise that we court is that we awaken to the realization of this truth, and this truth sets us free. That we are free now. It's not something that's promised in the future. It's not something that happened in the past. It's the eternal now of the principle of truth that God and I are one. Say that with me. God and I are one. God and I are one. I and the Father, Mother presence are one. And it is this remembrance, this thing that has never changed, this truth that is eternal, that is the cornerstone of the identity that we are. The identity of the beloved that we are now. You don't need to fix yourself up. You don't need to make yourself better. You can't do that. You've been trying to do that this whole experience. And the promise is to let it go. Let the struggle go. Let the process and the striving go. And to take that breath and to know that you have arrived now, that this place is holy, that the promise is the miracle. What is a miracle? A miracle is a sudden shift of perception from fear to love, from a thought system of fear to a thought system of love. We can let the shoulders drop here. Love is yummy. Love is good. Love is easy. Love knows how to love. Love knows how to see. Love knows how to whisper in the ears. You see, everything is already given because we are as God created us. And so the miracle is the shift from fear to love, from the mindset of fear to the mindset of love, from separation to oneness to unity, where we are fearless and limitless. And that this is our touchstone. This is the cornerstone of our experience. And so what is a promise? A promise is something that is assured. A promise says, you know what, it's going to be okay. You know what, you're already holy now. You know what, you are my beloved, in whom I am already so well pleased. You don't need to do anything but breathe and allow that truth to wash over us now. This ground is holy because we stand upon it and because everything is holy. So this is a sacred sanctuary because we claim it to be so and we recognize it as such. So how grateful I am for the promise that was read, the promise that was spoken. It's the promise that we can release all of our pain, all of our suffering in a holy instant. And what I love about this promise, this assurance, it constitutes for us a pathway. I love how in one little reading, in one document that you guys received, one little thing that you got, our whole teaching is there. I'm going to invite you to take this home with you, to pray with it. If you didn't get one, we'll make sure that you get one. It's the reading that Beth read. And what it is it's a promise. And sometimes when we're starting on our path and we're grieving, or we feel hurt, or we feel traumatized, or we believe that we have experienced a loss, that a promise can be the very thing that gives us hope. It can be the very thing that is that little shard of light, a little shard of illumination that says, follow this. And if you really take in and partake of this reading, this promise, it's very, very simple, my friends. We got big books that talk about what's on this one little page called The Promise by Jeshua ben Joseph. Mind you, the voice of Christ. The reason why it might resonate within you as capital T truth is because the Christ is in you. The Christ is a principle that when we step into that principle, wow, I got really a little dizzy there. When we step into that principle, it can feel a little disorienting because we've been walking outside of that principle for so long. Not really. It's actually just a little blip of time. So our remembrance is what we're talking about. And the promise is actually, and anybody like math here? See, like I like math. I'm somebody who actually likes. This promise is a formula. It's A plus B plus C, then this. So when we follow the pathway of this formula, the promise is that the pain and the suffering and the angst and the sense of aloneness and isolation and separation, it moves away from our consciousness in our awareness, like the wind brushing the foam from the top of the sea, so that you can actually see the depth of the love of the ocean that supports us always. And so that's what the promise is. Anybody here want to let go of pain? Anybody here want to let go of suffering? Yeah. Anybody here want to feel happy, joyous, and free? All the time. Now, our human mind might say, no, that's not a possibility, but the Christ of our being knows that it is. And that the pain and the suffering that we might experience along the journey is simply our resistance to the allowance of what's seeking to emerge through us. That's it. So when we feel that pain, that angst, that suffering, all we have to do is take a breath. Do that with me. It's always good to pause. Let's take a breath. Let's connect together. And as we take that breath, we consult our formula. And the very first thing that it says, let me access it, is that when we become wholly committed, holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, holy, but you can read it as holy, H-O-L-Y, because holiness is whole. Nothing is lacking. So when nothing is lacking in our willingness to wake up from the dream that we've been dreaming, when we're saying, you know what, I'm all in. I am all in. I want to wake up from this dream. That's the first step. It's a willingness. Back when part of my mother's experience towards the end of her life placed her in a really beautiful place, but it was a nursing home. It was, and she had lost her memory of this experience. And I remember I would go and visit her. And there were other people like her there, all beautiful, wonderful emanations of spirit. In some ways, they forgot this dream. And it seems so tragic to us. And it can be, but there's like gifts in it as well. Because the angst of the past was no longer a memory. And there was a childlike wonder. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes a happiness and joy connected with that. And when I would go and visit her, there was a man who had been in the 12-step program. And he would have these little pieces of paper, and anytime anybody walked in, and multiple times thereafter, would raise his hand with one of these little pieces of paper to hand it to you. And he would holler out, willingness is the key. Willingness is the key. And that's what we're talking about here. We're cultivating a willingness to allow our perception of the dream to shift. We're inviting the corners of our consciousness to begin to lighten up, like illuminate, so that we can see like paper kind of curling up on the edges, the gaps in what this dream is. When I was a little girl and I would go to bed at night, we had like this green shag carpeting. It was a dark green. And I remember that I believed that when the lights went out, that dark green carpet turned into alligators. And I remember there was a closet, and my mom and dad would have that light on so that there would be a little light in there. But the clothes, when the rest of the lights in the room went out, those clothes looked like monsters in the closet. And sometimes I would go to sleep and go into a dream of alligators and monsters. And as a little girl, every once in a while in the middle of the night, I'd have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, how am I going to cross all those alligators and get by those monsters in order to get from point A to point B? And I swear, those little feet of mine, they flew right over those alligators. And sometimes they'd end up in my mom and dad's bed. Other times they would come into the room because maybe in my dream, in my nightmare, I might holler out, and they would come in, and they would gently nudge me and say, wake up, honey, wake up, beloved, you're just dreaming. And they'd turn on the lights, and the alligators would become green shag carpet, and the monsters in the closet I could see were just clothes hanging in the closet. This is the willingness that we're cultivating. The idea that the mind that has believed itself to be separate has made a thought system. And thoughts are things. And these thoughts as things becomes dense. And it looks and feels real. We think we see chairs. We think we see carpet. We think that we see walls. But really, if we see with the eye of Christ, we're seeing the light and the illumination of the chair loving you, the carpet loving you, this whole space loving us. As we become willing to wake up from the dream that we contrived together, that believes in sin, believes in sickness, believes in death and despair and separation. We're waking up. We become wholly committed. Wholly committed. Is there anyone here wholly committed to awakening from this dream? You can say yes. You can say maybe. I'm not really quite sure yet. That's okay too. You can say, I'm willing to consider it. You can begin to walk in the direction to soften the body eyes so that the spiritual eye can see things a little bit differently. To see with the eyes of love is the remembrance that only love is real. And everything that looks unlike love is that cry for love of a world that fell asleep and forgot. So I am here to be wholly committed. Does that mean I'm perfect in my walk? No. But it does mean that I pick myself up, I dust myself off, and I keep going. I persist. I'm wholly committed to the best of my ability in each moment to awaken from the dream, to resist the idea that I must fight, to resist the idea of making anyone wrong. I'm wholly committed to see things differently. Take a breath here. Nothing extraordinary happens without commitment. Nothing. We were committed to the dream, and we can commit now to awakening just as easy. In fact, it's easier. Doesn't feel like it, but it's easier because it's our nature. Okay, so the first thing is I am wholly committed to awakening from the dream of separation. Then the next thing is, and my only desire is to be as God created me to be. So I'm willing to wake up, and my desire, my one desire is to be as God created me to be. So last week we talked about an invitation, and that the invitation is the call of the heart. And you might say, well, the call of my heart right now is to go play pickleball. Or the call of my heart right now is to be an artist. Or the call of my heart is to be a minister. Or the call of my heart is to simply be. And all of those things are what lead us to actually being as God created us to be. Because guess what? The desire of our heart, love, points the way. And the way that it points for each of us looks different because it's speaking to you in the unique way that you're here to show up in the world. So the practice this week, so we're cultivating willingness, and we're cultivating the heart's desire to be as God created us to be. Did God create us to be sad? Did God create us to be unloving? Did God create us to be lacking in anything? Did God create us fearful? If everything is holy now, if everything is whole, God created us whole, perfect, complete. How, if God is all that there is, if love is all that there is, and love created and extended itself as all of creation, how could it create anything other than itself? If God is all there is. Love is all there is. So our waking up is the commitment and the desire to be as God created us, not as I made myself up to be. How arrogant of me. How arrogant it has been for me to think I could be something other than what God created. And it's a divine humility to say, oh no, I was mistaken. God, I am as you created me. It's not arrogant to say I'm perfect. It's not arrogant to say I'm whole. Oh my God, that's honoring the Creator. That's honoring the Creator. Take a breath here. Are we willing to honor God? Are we willing to honor God by being magnificent, kind, loving, beautiful? Because that's what and who we are. I don't know about you guys, but man, I've spent so many years trying to be what other people thought I ought to be. I spent a lot of years believing I needed to be a certain way to please you or to satisfy the world in order to be safe and provided for. I don't know about you, but boy, I've sure compromised myself and my heart's desires. What I'm learning now is that the heart's desire is my pathway home. because I'm following love. And love leads perfectly. So I'm wholly committed. I am wholly committed to waking up from this dream, and I'm cultivating the only desire to be as God created me to be. And then all life is from there, my friends. All it is from there is placing upon the altar everything. God, Creator, beloved, I offer myself to thee. I offer all of me. I offer my thoughts. I offer my best thoughts and my worst thoughts. I offer it all. I offer my heart's desires. I offer my vision. I offer my relationship with you. I offer upon the altar this ministry. I offer upon the altar the ways that I think that I am to be in this world. I place upon this offer, I offer to God everybody I'm upset with. I put them on the altar and my resentments and my fears about it, and how do I interact? Oh my God, this is a letting go. You're going to unload it upon this altar. What is the altar? The altar is the center of your heart space, and the heart is love. Love heals all things. My best thinking hasn't healed a gosh darn thing. Has yours? Hasn't done any good. My best thinking has taken me down some pretty scary pathways that once I got there, I'm like, God, get me out of this. Well, we can do that now. We can just place upon this altar this devotion, this willingness to give it up, this willingness to say, of my own self I do nothing, of my own self I know nothing. I'm willing to humiliate the ego, the thinking mind, to humiliate it, the one that has created this dream. I'm willing to let it go, that I may be free. I place it upon the altar. And what do I do then? I let it go. And I walk upon my pathway. And I allow, I don't make, I don't take another class, I don't read another book. I allow. Anybody know how to allow? We're not really good at that. Let's take a breath. You get to allow to let correction come. Imagine this, if you will. Imagine that you've put everything upon the altar and you allow correction to come. All of the things that you've been worried about, all of the burdens that you've carried, all of the ways that you felt that you were wrong, all the ways that you thought other people were, you've dumped it on this altar. You've given it. It's a devotion to God to transform it for us. Take that breath again. We let it go. We allow. And we walk forth in the faith and the trust that God's got it. God's large and in charge. I tried to be large and in charge. I tried to make myself big and puff myself up, the small self. But when I say, get thee behind me, all of that, and I walk forth, I am light, I am illuminated, I am free. I am as God created me to be. And as I walk forth, as you walk forth, as we walk forth, guess what? We recognize one another. The Christ has entered this room, and it's you, and it's me, and it's us. It's all of us. There's no hierarchy, no specialness. We are all ministers of God. We are all ministers of love. We are all called and invited. And it is good and very good.